Quivering Desire. Chapter 1. Just a drink. I wasn't supposed to be out tonight, but something inside me itched. Deep, restless, hungry. I needed air. I needed out. I didn't live alone, not even close. I was hemmed in by noise that never ends. The low static of the TV no one was really watching, the anxious hum of the fridge, the ever-present ticking of a life too carefully constructed. I had built it all, piece by piece. The job, the apartment, the calendar colored in with precision, a life that looked good from the outside. But on the inside, I was quiet in the wrong places. Something was missing. A beat that never drops. A touch that never came. The firm I worked for had booked Damien a room at the hotel where the weekend seminar was also taking place. One of my subordinates, technically. But Damien was new to the firm and never felt like just another line on the payroll. The hotel was close to my apartment, a 30-minute walk, or maybe a little more if I strolled. And I started thinking about the quiet. The low hum of the city pressing its lips onto the night. The way hotel lights cast shadows like secrets. And the way I needed to slip into one of them. I told myself I might meet a couple of clients, have a drink, talk business. I always say that when I want to feel reckless without admitting I'm chasing something. And tonight, it wasn't about business. There was something about the air, charged, alive, like a whisper against skin before the kiss lands. I needed to feel different, to lose myself for a moment in something unscheduled. Unpredictable, undone. So I did what I wasn't supposed to do. I snuck out, softly, silently, like desire slipping past reason, wearing intention and a hint of naughtiness. No goodbyes, no explanations, just the familiar sound of my door closing behind me and the click of my heels falling into step with a city that didn't ask questions. I didn't even think about Damien. Not exactly. It wasn't about him, not yet. It was about what he represented. A what-if, a soft detour off the straight and narrow. A door cracked open in a hallway I didn't know I wanted to walk down. And somewhere between the streetlight and the lobby, my pulse started to race. I walked through the lobby like I owned the night when I arrived. Not rushed, not hesitant. Each step measured, heels kissing the marble floor with a quiet kind of command. I wasn't just another woman ducking into the bar for a drink. I was Liz, a corporate lawyer, partner. Poised. Sharp. Untouchable. Or so I told myself. I slid onto a bar stool and ordered a glass of red, letting the stem settle between my fingers like an extension of my mood. The wine came quickly, rich, deep, and dark as desire. I took a sip. Let it linger. Let it stain my lips with something close to confidence. The room hummed with half-hearted flirtations and practiced laughs. I offered mine in return. Small talk, polished smiles, the easy charm of someone who knew how to play the game. But I wasn't really there for that. My mind kept drifting to him, to Damien. The very thought sent a flicker of heat coiling low in my belly. I hadn't planned to seek him out, but the bar was too small for secrets, too intimate for pretending. And then, there he was, leaning against the far end of the bar, one hand resting on the polished wood, the other curled casually around a glass. Relaxed, composed, dangerously self-assured. He saw me. Of course he did. And when our eyes met, it was like everything else dropped away. The clinking glasses, the background music, the murmur of voices. All I could hear was the space between us tightening. His gaze didn't wander. It didn't question. It just held mine, steady, slow, and thick with implications. He didn't wait for an invitation. Maybe he didn't need one. He moved toward me like it had already been decided, like he knew. And when he reached me, that smile, that quiet curve of his lips, said everything neither of us dared to speak. Not yet. "Liz," he said, voice like warm velvet, poured low and slow into the space between us. Didn't expect to see you here. My name sounded different from his lips, less like just a name and more like a secret. And for a second I forgot how to breathe. I should have said something safe, something professional. But that part of me, the one that wears tailored suits and speaks in bullet points, had already gone quiet. What answered was something softer, bolder, and a little reckless. Just needed a drink, I said, the shrug of my shoulder masking the pulse in my throat. Figured I might as well make an appearance before tomorrow. He nodded slowly, considered. That makes sense. But the look he gave me said something else entirely. That smile. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It curled at the corners of his mouth like he was in on a secret and I was part of it. We talked. At first it was easy. Work, the seminar, harmless banter. But under it all, something kept shifting. The air grew warmer, more intimate, as if the whole bar had tilted just a little to draw us closer. He laughed at something I said, leaned in, and suddenly, the distance between our bodies didn't feel like enough. There was something about Damien, something that didn't ask permission. He spoke to me, just me. And I felt it. The way his gaze lingered just a beat longer than necessary. The way his voice dipped when he said my name again, as if he knew it was stirring something beneath my skin. He didn't speak to Liz from senior management. I wasn't just sitting at a hotel bar anymore. I was seen. Not as a title. Not as a polished version of myself built for boardrooms and leadership reviews. But as a woman. One with fire in her veins and hunger tightening low in her belly. As the evening stretched on, the wine kept finding its way to our glasses. 1, then 2, then 3. And with every slow sip, something slipped. Not just the formalities, but the quiet rules I'd lived by. The ones that kept me composed, controlled, safe. His voice was softer now, and mine was warmer. The conversation strayed from work and drifted into something more personal, tender, tempting. Somewhere between laughter and silence, we crossed an invisible line. I couldn't tell you when, only that it happened. How we went from colleagues to something more elemental. Two people circling something unspoken, each word daring the other to come closer. I should have left, but I didn't. I stayed. And then his hand brushed against mine as he reached for his glass, and suddenly, nothing felt light at all. It was barely a touch. A whisper of skin on skin, but it felt like thunder beneath the surface of my body. I didn't move, didn't flinch. I just let my fingers rest there, close enough to feel his pulse, and close enough to know this wasn't just in my head. He noticed. God, he noticed. His fingers slid over mine, warm, firm, purposeful. He held my hand like he'd done it before. In some dream neither of us dared speak aloud. And I let him. I let that touch bloom through me, a slow ache that traveled all the way to my knees. For a moment, the bar disappeared. The clinking glasses, the scattered laughter, the curated charm of public space, none of it existed. Just this. Just us. When I looked up and saw the way his eyes had darkened, like he'd made a decision, like he already knew how the next hour would unfold, I felt something shift in me. Something deeper. Hungrier. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It wasn't just flirting. This was desire. And it had finally been touched. Before I knew it, we were laughing again. Close, easy, sharing whispered jokes like we were in on something no one else could understand. And then, in one careless moment, I tipped my glass, the red wine splashing across my chest and down my dress. I froze. My heart skipped. And then Damien, he didn't skip a beat. "Let me help you." His voice was calm and reassuring. "You can borrow my room to clean up. No big deal, no weirdness," he added, his smile wide and disarming. I should have said no. I should have just called a cab and returned to the life I had built. the life I was supposed to live. But I didn't. "All right," I said, the words slipping out, quieter than intended. "Just give me a minute." Then we headed upstairs. The slow hum of the elevator as it climbed felt endless. My thoughts scrambled as I raced to make sense of the moment. I wasn't naive. I knew exactly what this could lead to. But still, a strange, unfamiliar pull made my heart beat harder, my skin suddenly too sensitive, too aware. When we finally reached his room, Damien opened the door. I stepped inside. The room was simple, like any other hotel room, but something about it made it feel private, intimate, a space where no one else had the right to be. "Make yourself at home," he said, his voice low but smooth, almost like a promise. "I'll leave you to freshen up." Inside the bathroom, I stood in front of the mirror for a long moment. The rush of the evening, the wine, the laughter, the touch, still buzzed beneath my skin. I let the cool water run over my hands, trying to steady my pulse. I could just fix my dress and leave, pretend nothing had happened, return to the life that made sense. But something told me that walking away wasn't an option. So I stood there a moment longer, letting the cool water ground me, even as the warmth inside me continued to build. I'd be fine. I'd dry my dress, and I'd leave. And yet, my body knew better. I wasn't prepared for what I found when I stepped out. Damien stood by the bed, his shirt discarded, the soft light of the room catching the lines of him. He turned toward me, and his gaze locked with mine. The darkness in his eyes deepened, and I could feel the weight of his stare like a touch, pulling at me. I froze. The tension between us was palpable, thickening the air with a kind of raw electricity I couldn't deny. Every part of me was suddenly awake, screaming for something I hadn't been able to admit even to myself. I took a step toward him, and then my feet betrayed me. I lost my balance, pitching forward, and his arms were there before I could fall. Strong hands caught me, steady and unyielding, lifting me back like I weighed nothing. We stood there for a breathless moment, suspended in time. His eyes searched mine. A flicker of hesitation, a question, an unspoken uncertainty. And then he moved closer. Slowly, deliberately, as if every step mattered. He reached out, his fingers grazing the edge of my dress. The touch was light but unmistakable, sending a jolt of electricity straight through me. I didn't pull away. I leaned in. What followed was inevitable. The quiet collapse of every wall I had so carefully built. Not reckless, not regretted. Just two people finally letting go of the distance between them, surrendering to something that had been building since the first moment our eyes met across a crowded bar. The fire in the hearth cast long, amber shadows across the room as the night unfolded. Slow, consuming, and entirely ours. Afterward, we lay tangled together, breathless and still. The fire had dwindled to a soft glow. I nestled closer to him, letting the rise and fall of his chest soothe the flutter still in mine. He didn't speak. Neither did I. Words would have ruined it. Instead, we let the silence stretch, warm and thick, like a blanket draped over our tangled limbs. I traced lazy circles along his chest, memorizing the feel of him. Every part of me still ached, but it was a beautiful ache. He kissed my shoulder, softly now. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of his embrace and the quiet of the room pull me towards something close to sleep. We were more than just a stolen evening in that moment. We were fire and rhythm, and silence, and stillness. And whatever came after this, well, that was for Monday. I should have felt guilty. Maybe I did in some quiet corner of my mind. But it was drowned out by the warmth still flickering in my veins. By the way he tightened his arm around me, as if he could read my thoughts and didn't want me to slip away just yet. And I didn't want to. I wanted to stay in this cocoon of post-passion haze. Let the scent of the evening cling to my skin. Let the memory of his touch mark me from the inside out. I had snuck out of my home and left the safety of my little world behind. But in that moment, none of it mattered. All that mattered was this raw, unapologetic connection. I felt changed. Not broken, not reckless, empowered. Like I'd taken something for myself, something that belonged to me and me alone. No permission, no explanations, just a moment of pure, undeniable want, and the courage to chase it. End of Chapter 1. If you're enjoying the story, this is the tamed version. If you want the full, unedited, quivering desire, every heat, every detail, every moment we had to leave out to keep it clean for this platform, grab your physical copy and enjoy the uninhibited version. Quivering Desire. Chapter 2. Morning Glory. The soft light of Saturday morning crept through the curtains, its golden rays brushing across the room and warming my skin. My eyes fluttered open slowly, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. But then I felt it. A stir beside me, a reminder of last night. Damien. My body was still pressed against his warmth surrounding me. I hadn't meant to fall asleep like this, tangled in the aftermath of what we had shared. But here I was, his arms wrapped tightly around me, holding on like he didn't want to let go. The more I held on to him, the more I wanted him. It wasn't just the warmth of our bodies beneath the sheets, or the soft pull of dawn light sneaking through the curtains. It was something more profound. Something that pulsed beneath my skin and burned just below my breath. We didn't say a word. We didn't have to. Our bodies had already spoken the night before, cried out, demanded, whispered. And now, in the hush of early morning, we simply found each other again. His hand slid slowly over my hip, tracing the curve like he was rediscovering a place he'd only begun to map. What followed was unhurried and reverent, the kind of closeness that doesn't rush but smolders, not frenzied like the night before. This was something more tender, more deliberate, like we were worshipping something sacred in one another. His voice came low and rough against my ear. You feel like a dream in the morning. And I did. I felt like something wild and untamed, like this moment didn't belong to the real world at all. Just us. Just this. Lost in the heat and hush of a new day. He knew exactly what he was doing. How to keep me hovering on the edge of unraveling. How to pull every sigh and whispered plea from somewhere deep inside me. His patience was maddening in the best way. "You're going to remember this every time you close your eyes," he murmured. And I already knew he was right. "Say it," he whispered, barely brushing his lips against mine. "Tell me what you want." My voice came out raw and shaking. You. After that, there was no more holding back, no more teasing. Just that slow, exquisite surrender, blooming from my spine to my fingertips until I was nothing but sensation. He whispered my name against my skin, soft, worshipful, and I shattered. He followed, and for a long moment neither of us moved. Just lay there, limbs tangled, the world outside our little cocoon entirely irrelevant. Wrapped in the quiet glow of the aftermath, he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and kissed my forehead, murmuring something soft I didn't quite catch, but felt all the way down to my bones. I had never felt more undone, or more whole. As the moment of intimacy passed and silence settled between us, a strange clarity washed over me. Damien shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look at me. I met his gaze, a mix of emotions swirling in my chest. Embarrassment, excitement, guilt, but above all, a sense of exhilaration that made it hard to focus on anything else. We were both sober now, and the weight of the last 12 hours began to settle in. The morning after an indulgence you knew you'd enjoy but weren't quite sure how you'd explain to anyone else. Still, the embarrassment didn't seem to matter much. I was floating in the afterglow, and for now, it was enough to simply share this unspoken understanding with him. The world outside the room seemed distant and irrelevant. I couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. I had snuck out, had this unexpected and unforgettable night, and now all I could do was lie there laughing inwardly at how quickly everything had changed. Despite all the uncertainty, there was a sense of peace about it. Sometimes life needs a little spontaneity, a little reckless indulgence, and the previous 12 hours had undoubtedly been one of those moments. End of Chapter 2. If you're enjoying the story, this is the tamed version. If you want the full, unedited, quivering desire, every heat, every detail, every moment we had to leave out to keep it clean for this platform, grab your physical copy and enjoy the uninhibited version. Quivering Desire. Chapter 3. Afternoon Delight. I went home early in the morning and got ready for the day. It wasn't a graceful exit. I couldn't exactly explain where I'd spent the night, but that stopped bothering me the moment I stepped back into the hotel for the seminar, because I hadn't even given my presentation yet, and I was already a wreck. I stood in the green room, pretending to review my notes one last time, but the truth? My body was humming with memories that had nothing to do with keynote slides or quarterly projections. Damien had rooted himself deep in my head, and nothing I did could shake the pull. I adjusted my blouse again, tugging the fabric like it could somehow erase the ghost of his touch. But the memory clung. His voice at my ear, the warmth of his hands, the way he'd looked at me afterward like I was more than just a moment. Every inhale made me remember. Every exhale made me want. I wasn't nervous about the presentation. I was supposed to be polished, commanding, ready to lead. But my pulse said otherwise. It beat against my skin like it had heard secrets my mouth hadn't dared speak aloud. I checked my reflection, fixed a flyaway strand of hair, touched up my lip color, pretending to be thorough. But inside, I was burning. A knock on the door pulled me back to reality, a staffer letting me know I had 5 minutes. 5 minutes to look like I hadn't spent all morning soaked in memory and wanting more. 5 minutes to pull myself together and pretend that last night hadn't unraveled me in all the best and worst ways. And somewhere in the room beyond that door, Damien was waiting. I was afraid one look would undo me all over again. When the time finally came, I walked to the front like I had done 100 times before, heels sharp, spine straight, smile polished into place. On the outside, I looked every bit the law firm partner, ready to deliver. But inside, I was a storm barely contained by lipstick and willpower. I launched into the presentation on muscle memory more than presence of mind. The numbers, the jargon I usually wielded like a blade, it all felt flat. My voice was steady, but my brain was foggy. Then it happened. My eyes found Damien in the crowd, and just like that, I was off script. He wasn't doing anything, really. Just sitting there, calm, composed, razor-sharp focus trained on me. But the second our eyes locked, a current jolted through me, low and dangerous. I stumbled over a line, pretended to glance at my notes. My heart thudded in my ears, and suddenly the conference room felt 10 degrees warmer. God, he looked good. Confident. A little smug. Like he knew exactly what he'd done to me. And the worst part? I wanted him to know. But this was my space. My name was on the agenda, and I was supposed to own it. So I kept talking. I talked through my dry mouth and the heat building at the base of my spine. I forced my eyes to the slides, to the back wall, to anywhere but him. But my body betrayed me every time I glanced back. Breath hitching, skin flushing, losing the thread of an argument I'd rehearsed a dozen times. It was humiliating and exhilarating. I hated that he made me feel this way. I hated that I loved it even more. Somewhere deep down, a part of me whispered that I was losing control. It wasn't wrong. But as I stood there, clutching a remote I could barely focus on, I realized something else. Maybe, just maybe, I didn't want it back. After fumbling through the final few slides, I smiled, nodded, and excused myself with as much grace as I could scrape together. My legs were shaking, but I didn't want to show it. I just needed to move, needed to breathe. And like a shadow, Damien followed. Of course he did. He knew I was teetering. My feet led me to the elevator, almost as if they had a mind of their own. I stood there, blinking at the chrome doors like they held the answer to whatever the hell I was feeling. If I'd really wanted to freshen up, I could have ducked into the nearest washroom. There was no reason, none I could admit anyway, for me to be standing there. Until Damien's voice slid in beside me. "You all right?" he asked, his eyes low and quiet. I nodded. Too fast. Too fake. He waited a beat, then leaned in just a touch. "Do you want to lie down for a bit?" My brain fired every warning it had, every professional boundary, every sensible reason to say no and walk the other way. But my body had already made the decision. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. I still didn't move. And then, I stepped in. He followed. The ride was silent. Not awkward, not stiff. Just quiet in a way that crackled, like static before a storm. My heart was beating out of rhythm, like it couldn't decide whether to race or pause. When we stepped into his room, it hit me all over again. How familiar the space already felt. How my body remembered it better than my mind wanted to admit. He closed the door behind us, then leaned against it for a second, just watching me. His eyes weren't hungry. They were searching, making sure I was still in this with him. I took a breath, stepped out of my heels one at a time, and walked toward the edge of the bed. "I couldn't focus all morning," I whispered, more to myself than to him. All I could think about was you. That's when he crossed the room. He didn't rush, didn't speak. His hands found the edge of my blazer, sliding it off my shoulders like he was unwrapping something precious. And maybe, in that moment, that's exactly how I wanted to feel. Like something rare. Wanted. Worth taking time with. The blazer hit the floor. I didn't care. He kissed me, slow, deep, and sure. And just like that, we weren't colleagues anymore. We weren't in the middle of a seminar weekend. We were just two people tangled up in a quiet storm that had been building since the moment we met. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "No," I breathed, brushing my lips over his jaw. But I wanted anyway. That was all it took. What followed was slow, consuming, and maddeningly good. He moved with purpose, tender where I ached for softness, sure where my hunger was louder than my words. I didn't need to ask, he already knew. "I've been thinking about this since you walked into that seminar," he murmured against my neck. "You looked so buttoned up, but your eyes told a different story." He looked at me, really looked at me, and I felt it. Not just desire, but recognition. Like he saw the version of me that lived beneath the tailored suit and the careful composure. And he wasn't the least bit intimidated by her. I wasn't just lying there beneath him. I was being played. Like a violin, every nerve drawn taut, every breath catching at a different tempo. And when he whispered things low against my skin, I felt the music climb, coil, and break. I wasn't in control anymore. And strangely, I didn't want to be. For the first time in what felt like forever, I surrendered, let go of every thought, every mask, every layer of the woman I usually wore so well. He stripped me down to something raw, and the melody he played was mine. When the silence finally settled, I lay there, breathless, caught somewhere between reality and a dream I didn't want to wake from. Damien didn't say anything at first. He collapsed beside me, chest rising and falling, and reached for my hand without opening his eyes. Our fingers laced slowly, deliberately. I could feel the rhythm of his pulse against mine, steady now, grounding. He pulled my hand to his chest, like he needed to feel me still there, still real. Emotion crept in then, like a tide I hadn't seen coming. I felt raw. Not in a bad way, but in that rare, achingly human way that comes when someone has seen too much of you and doesn't look away. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and kissed my temple, just once, and I swear I felt it bloom all the way to my toes. Neither of us said it, but we both knew something had shifted. This wasn't supposed to happen again. It was supposed to be one night, one secret, one beautiful mistake. But now, my body remembered every note he played. And worse, my heart had started listening too. "You should probably head back," he said gently after a while. I groaned and buried my face in the pillow, half laughing, half mourning the moment. I didn't want to move. Not because I was tired. I just didn't want to leave him. That space, that feeling. But he was right. I peeled myself off the bed with the kind of reluctance that bordered on emotional rebellion and went to freshen up. As I stared at my reflection, I tried to find the version of me that had walked in this morning, composed, in control, calculated. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who felt like she was flying too close to the sun, and I wasn't sure I cared if I got burned. If you're enjoying the story, this is the tamed version. If you want the full, unedited, quivering desire, every heat, every detail, every moment we had to leave out to keep it clean for this platform, grab your physical copy and enjoy the uninhibited version. Quivering Desire. Chapter 4. An Electrifying Evening. I couldn't remember the details of the day, what I wore, who I spoke to, how many meetings I sat through. Everything blurred into static behind the one face that refused to leave my thoughts. Damien. His name played on a loop in my mind like a guilty pleasure I didn't want to give up. I was acting like a 13-year-old girl nursing her first big crush, except this wasn't sweet or innocent. It was deeper, raw. My thoughts weren't butterflies and doodled initials. They were fire, feverish. I resented the way he had slipped past my defenses, taking up space not just in my body, but in the places I usually kept guarded. My emotions had never been so easily swayed, and yet, I was enjoying every moment of it. It wasn't just memory that haunted me. It was sensation, the warmth of his hands, the way his breath would hitch when I touched him in just the right place. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring into space, replaying those moments like my mind was trying to brand them into my body. It wasn't just desire anymore. It was obsession. Creeping in slowly and silently, curling around my ankles and tugging me deeper every time I swore I'd found my footing. And worst of all, I didn't want it to stop. My heart beat faster whenever I thought of being alone with him again. There was a tension coiled inside me, tightly wound and humming with electricity. Every moment apart felt like holding my breath, waiting for the next spark, the next chance encounter, the next excuse to close the distance again. I was in trouble. Delicious, dangerous trouble. And I was already hoping night would fall quickly. The seminar ended with the usual mix of handshakes, smiles, and polite nods. I went through the motions, saying the right things, thanking the right people, but it all felt distant, like watching myself through a foggy window. My mind wasn't in the room. It hadn't been all day. And then I saw him, Damien, standing casually near the back of the room, chatting with someone, hands in his pockets like he had all the time in the world. He wasn't looking at me. He didn't have to. The second I saw him, An electrifying current ran through my body, hot and uninvited, and I had to remind myself, "Control yourself, Liz." I kept my pace steady as I walked past, pretending to be focused on the door. But my body had other plans. My breath caught in my throat, and even though I didn't look back, I felt him notice. I didn't have to see his smile. I could feel it curl behind me like a heat wave. In the lobby, a tap on my elbow. I turned slightly. "Damien." Voice low, casual. "Too crowded," he said. "Do you want to ride home?" I should have said no. Somewhere in my head, I did. That version of me, the one who makes smart decisions, who keeps things professional, she said no. She probably even meant it. But that's not what happened. Instead, I nodded. Small, subtle, but it was all the answer he needed. And somehow, without another word, we slipped out together, past the crowd and the polite noise, and into a different kind of silence entirely, the kind that buzzed with anticipation. We got to my apartment building and pulled into the driveway. The engine was still running, but neither of us moved. The conversation had turned easy and slow, like soft jazz playing in the background of something unspoken. I laughed at something he said. He smiled at something I didn't. Damien parked the car, half-blocking traffic, and I didn't stop him. I didn't want him to move. Sitting there beside him, cocooned in that dim, humming space between our words, I felt warm, flustered in a way that had nothing to do with the late summer heat. Something had been building since the morning, since the elevator, since last night, really. I knew I had to leave before I completely unraveled. Because I was smitten, heart-thumping, breath-catching smitten, and doing everything in my power to hide it. So I made my move. Better to leave with something still unsaid than to say too much. I leaned in, kissed him softly on the cheek, impulsively, and immediately regretted it. It was innocent, stupid, sweet, way too much. Or maybe too little. I didn't know anymore. I turned away, avoided his eyes, stepped out of the car, and walked straight toward the entrance of my building, trying not to look back. I told myself I'd done the right thing until I got inside and realized I'd left my phone in his car. My stomach dropped. Going back meant facing him again, the same him I'd spent the whole evening resisting. Going back risked everything I'd tried so hard to keep together tonight. I wanted him. God, I wanted him. But I also wanted to stay in control. Right now, I wasn't sure I could have both. So I sat on the edge of my bed, shoes still on, keys still in hand, trying to think clearly. The memory of his eyes, his voice, his scent, all of it still clung to me like heat on skin after rain. After several minutes of pacing and overthinking every possible angle, I called Damien from my landline, something I hadn't done in years. My voice was calm, but my heart was doing laps. I asked casually if I'd left my phone in his car. He confirmed it. "I'll bring it back," he said easily, like he hadn't just driven 10 minutes away. I was already on the highway, but it's no big deal. I told him he didn't have to, but I didn't stop him either. Then came the question that made my breath hitch. "You want me to meet you in the driveway, or should I come up?" It was innocent, practical, but it didn't feel innocent. Not to me. My instinct screamed driveway, safer, neutral, fast in, fast out. But what came out of my mouth was, "Come up, if you don't mind." And just like that, I'd invited temptation into my space. The apartment was empty. No voices, no noise, no buffer. And if anyone came back and found him here, that alone could unravel the carefully constructed life I'd built for myself. I told myself it was just a phone drop-off. That was all. I fixed my hair in the mirror even though I wasn't going anywhere. Opened the door to wait. My heartbeat filled the hallway, louder than the silence. I panicked that waiting at the door might seem too eager, so I retreated back inside. My heart sank the moment I heard the knock. Then another, firmer, like he knew exactly what he was doing to me. "Coming," I called out, though the word barely left my lips. And then the door opened. There he was, 1 foot inside my world, holding my phone like a peace offering. But his eyes were the real confession. Dark, searching, lit with something that mirrored the fire scorching its way down my spine. I didn't think. I crossed the room in 3 breathless steps and went to him. Not gently, not sweetly, but with the raw ache of everything I'd been holding in since the moment he walked away. It was a kiss that tasted like a question and an answer all at once. He responded like he'd been waiting for it. One hand gripped my waist, the other slid into my hair. I arched into him. Heat bloomed between us. There was nothing polite about this, nothing clean or careful. This was a collision of mouths, of everything we hadn't said, of every second of silence between us finally giving way. He pressed me back against the wall, the door shutting behind him with the finality of a decision we'd already made. "Don't," he said at one point, low, forehead pressed to mine. "Not unless you want me to lose the last thread of control I've got left." That was the moment everything stilled. The air thickened. The silence pressed in, not empty, but loaded, like the moment right before lightning splits the sky. And in that pause, I realized I didn't just want the storm. I needed it. What came next was urgent and all-consuming, nothing like the slow reverence of the morning or the afternoon's quiet tenderness. This was raw, more desperate, like we'd both been holding our breath all day and had finally exhaled. Afterward, he held me, pressed against him, arms like a shelter rather than a cage. I felt his chest rise and fall against mine, his breath evening out slowly, his hands gentling. "You're incredible," he whispered. And the way he said it, not like a compliment, but like a confession, made something deep inside me clench. We stayed tangled together for a long time, heartbeats in sync, the storm quieting to a hum. It was raw, it was tender, it was everything. Silence settled over the room. Not heavy, not awkward, but full. Like we'd used up all the air and were only just remembering how to breathe. I stared at the ceiling. My thoughts were deafening. What just happened? I could feel him beside me, his fingers tracing idle patterns like he couldn't quite stop touching me. Part of me wanted to pull away, to pretend I wasn't this open. But the bigger part didn't move. I was scared. Not of him, but of myself. Of how quickly I'd given in. How badly I'd wanted it. How good it felt not to overthink, to just feel. I couldn't remember the last time I'd let go like that. The last time someone looked at me not like a title, but like someone they were genuinely completely drawn to. It was thrilling, terrifying. This wasn't just a casual thing anymore. At least not to me. And that realization came with a knot in my stomach. What was I doing? I turned slightly, just enough to glimpse him in the low light. Hair a mess, lips parted like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. This was dangerous territory, and I didn't trust myself not to fall too far too fast. Still, my heart beat a little differently now. And as he pulled me close without a word, like it was the most natural thing in the world, I realized I wasn't ready to let go just yet. After a long, quiet moment, I sat up. "Let's go back to the hotel," I said. His eyebrows lifted just slightly. That crooked grin appeared. He could probably tell what it meant, a woman asking to come with him. But he didn't press. He let me have my reasoning without demanding an explanation. I gathered a few things, threw on something comfortable, and we left the apartment with a particular hush hanging between us. Not awkward, just unsure. Like neither of us quite knew what this meant now that the line between attraction and something deeper had disappeared entirely. He opened the car door for me. Unnecessary, but sweet. As I slid into the seat, I realized I wasn't nervous anymore. I was curious. Curious about how long I could keep this going without it spiraling. Curious about whether he saw this as just a detour or something more. And curious about myself. This version of me who was breaking all her own rules, one evening at a time. As we pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back at the apartment. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. End of chapter 4. If you're enjoying the story, this is the tamed version. If you want the full, unedited, quivering desire, every heat, every detail, every moment we had to leave out to keep it clean for this platform, grab your physical copy and enjoy the uninhibited version. Quivering Desire, Chapter 5, Dancing with Fire. We got back to the hotel, both pretending we weren't holding the weight of what had just happened between us. Instead of heading straight to the room, we found ourselves at the bar. Dim lighting, hushed jazz, the soft clink of glasses around us. It was oddly comforting, the way the world slowed down just enough for us to sit shoulder to shoulder without the pressure of closed doors and unspoken expectations. We ordered drinks, something simple. I didn't need courage or excuses. I just wanted the quiet hum of a shared moment. Damien had this way of slipping into conversation that made it easy to forget how complicated everything had become. He talked about work, the politics behind the latest executive shuffle, and I let myself lean into it. We dissected the industry with the honesty of people who'd stopped trying to impress each other. He cursed about a particular partner's incompetence, and I laughed. Not the polite kind, but the real kind that bubbled up from somewhere unguarded. And maybe that's what steadied me. Because while I was with him, I wasn't craving him in that aching, desperate way I had earlier. The tension that had gripped me all day had finally found release, and now I could breathe. Deeply, evenly. Still, he looked good in this light. Too good. Sleeves rolled up, collar slightly undone, a small smirk at the corner of his lips every time I said something that surprised him. There was a little dance in the way he listened, like he enjoyed peeling back the layers I kept hidden from everyone else. I sipped slowly, letting the wine warm my throat but not dull my thoughts. I watched the way he leaned closer when I spoke, the occasional brush of his arm against mine feeling more like punctuation than accident. Every touch was light, casual, but it landed heavy. A reminder, a promise. We didn't talk about what had happened earlier. Not directly, but it was there. In the way his eyes lingered a little too long on my lips. In the way my foot accidentally pressed against his under the table and didn't move right away. We were speaking around it. Building a fortress of words so we didn't have to look directly at the fire still smoldering beneath the surface. And yet I liked it. I liked that we could be two things at once, raw and refined, tense and at ease. Laughing in a quiet hotel bar like we hadn't spent the entire day dismantling every wall I'd ever built. I wasn't sure where the night was going, but I knew I didn't want it to end. I excused myself to freshen up. A simple pause, a chance to breathe, to buy time from my own unraveling. When I returned, the sight stopped me cold. Damien was standing near the bar, leaning into conversation with two women, smartly dressed, confident, laughing a little too freely. One touched his arm as she spoke. The other tilted her head with that particular gleam women get when they think they've found someone worth pursuing. And just like that, the fire I thought had settled came roaring back to life. Jealousy wasn't an emotion I was used to. It rose hot and fast, bitter like adrenaline. My chest tightened. My steps faltered. I felt suddenly foolish. Like a girl dressing up in adult emotions, playing at a control I clearly didn't have. Before I could even check myself, I walked over and told him I was leaving. I didn't explain. I didn't wait for a response. Maybe I wanted to pull his attention back. Maybe I was punishing him for something he hadn't even done. Or maybe I was punishing myself. Because none of this was like me. I'd always taken pride in being strong, unshakable, practical. I never leaned too hard on anyone. I never let myself spiral over something as unspoken as a glance. But there I was. Something about him stripped me of all my careful armor. He hadn't promised me anything. He hadn't said the words. But the way he listened when I spoke, the way he looked at me like he saw right through me, it was enough to wreck every line I'd drawn for myself. I hated that. And I loved it. Every time I tried to pull back, I only fell harder. Like trying to climb out of water only to realize you'd already sunk too deep. I kept reaching for air, for distance, for control. But the truth was, I didn't want any of it. Not really. I wanted him. Not just the closeness, but the strange safety he gave me in a world where I never allowed myself to be soft. The more I tried to fight it, the more I fractured. And piece by piece, I was falling for him. Not gracefully, not with poetic logic, but hard, messy, and completely unprepared. And I didn't know what scared me more, how much I wanted him, or how much I might already need him. I walked toward the exit. He followed without a word. We left the hotel without saying much, not because there was nothing to say, but because the silence between us had grown comfortable. Charged, but not heavy. I didn't want to go home. Not yet. And definitely not alone. But I also didn't want him thinking I was some smitten schoolgirl chasing something more than what we had. I was towing a delicate line between wanting to be with him and wanting to appear untouched by him. We walked aimlessly at first, not even discussing where we were going. The city was winding down around us, its buzz softening to a hum. Streetlights flickered. Distant music spilled from a rooftop bar. I caught glimpses of us in reflective storefronts. Walking side by side, our pace synced like we'd been doing this for years. There was something soothing about it. Almost surreal. My heart wasn't pounding the way it had earlier, but it was beating differently, steadier, warmer. A few times I caught myself wanting to reach out, to brush my fingers against his or loop my arm through his, just to feel his weight beside me, to make it real in a quieter, more ordinary way. But I pulled back every time. Holding his hand would have said too much. Or maybe it would have said exactly what I felt, and that was the danger. The parking garage loomed ahead, our steps echoing against the concrete as we approached the car. It wasn't far, but I wished the walk were longer. I didn't want the moment to end. Being next to him like this, doing nothing spectacular, felt real. Not lust-driven, not charged. Just us, in a calm I didn't know I'd been craving. I'd spent years building a fortress around my emotions. Strong, independent, composed. And yet here I was, thinking about how not holding his hand might be the most effort I'd put into self-control all year. Because if I did, if I reached for him and he held on, I might never want to let go. As we neared his car, the atmosphere shifted immediately. The garage was different, denser, quieter, laced with the hum of distant engines and the echo of our footsteps off cold concrete. The kind of silence that makes you feel things louder. And that's when it hit me. Again. Something stirred. Not a thought exactly. More like a pulse. Urgent. Breathless. We'd been in a lounge with dim lights and other people just minutes ago. I had been collected, composed, sipping from a glass. But here? With only him, no audience, no interruptions, no pretense. The shift was seismic. I walked like nothing was wrong, but inside, everything was on fire. We reached the car. He looked at me with a quiet smile. I met his eyes, just briefly, but that look was enough. He moved toward the passenger side, ever the gentleman, reaching to open the door for me. But I couldn't. Not this time. I stepped forward, placed my hand flat on the door, and pushed it gently shut. He turned, surprised. Brows lifted, a question forming on his lips. But I didn't let him get a word out. I kissed him. Right there. Hard and unplanned and absolutely reckless. My hands tangled in his collar as I pressed into him, needing to feel something real after a day of holding back. There was no more pretending, no more distance. This was me, finally taking. He caught his breath against my mouth, surprised but not pulling away. His hands found my waist, then my hips, drawing me closer. I could feel his restraint slipping, and I was glad, because mine was already gone. We both knew it was risky. A parking garage isn't exactly private. The wrong person walking by, the wrong camera angle, and everything I'd worked for could unravel in a headline. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking about my firm, or my title, or Monday morning. I was thinking about how right it felt to finally stop pretending. "Tell me to stop," I whispered against his lips, "or take me back upstairs." His jaw tightened. His eyes darkened. And I knew. I wasn't the only one losing control tonight. He took my hand, urgent and wordless, and led me back toward the stairwell. We didn't look back. We didn't speak. Just the sound of our footsteps echoing off metal steps and the frantic rhythm of our breathing in the dark. Everything that needed to be said had already been said. In a parking garage, against a car door, in the space between stop and don't. What happened next, tucked away in that shadowed corner of the world, far from cameras and colleagues and consequences, was something I'd carry in my body long after the night was over. Not reckless, not regretted, just honest. The most honest I'd been in years. Afterward, we slipped out through the stairwell, breathless and half laughing, the thrill of it still buzzing under my skin. I felt like a teenager again, reckless, free, touched in places I hadn't known existed inside me. It wasn't just desire. It was release. A need poured out in the most unexpected way. Nothing in my recent memory had made me lose myself so fully. Nothing had reached into the quiet corners I'd sealed off so long ago. And yes, maybe there were cameras. Maybe someone had heard us. Maybe this could cost me everything I'd worked so hard for. But in that moment, I didn't care. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't measuring the weight of my actions or calculating how to fold this back into the neat lines of my life. I was just feeling, raw, wild, and utterly alive. And I wasn't sure if I was terrified or ready to let the whole thing burn. End of chapter 5. If you're enjoying the story, this is the tamed version. If you want the full, unedited, quivering desire, every heat, every detail, every moment we had to leave out to keep it clean for this platform, grab your physical copy and enjoy the uninhibited version. Quivering Desire. Chapter 6. Poisoned by Desire. He offered, because of course he did, always the gentleman, even now. "Let me take you home," he said, voice soft and steady. The kind of steady that was anything but calm. That voice. It did something to me. Turned simple phrases into sin. But I didn't want safe. I didn't want an ending. I wanted more. "No," I said quietly, eyes locking with his. "Take me back to your hotel." There was a pause. Barely half a second. But I felt it. Saw it. That flicker in his gaze, like something ancient and raw had just awakened. Not shock, not even surprise. Just recognition. Like he'd been hoping I'd say it but hadn't dared assume. Like we'd both already known we'd reached the point of no return, and this was just the moment we stopped pretending. He didn't speak, just nodded once and turned, leading the way. We left the garage without a word, but the silence between us wasn't empty. It was charged. Our footsteps echoed against the quiet night. His jacket brushed mine as we walked side by side, too close not to touch, still holding that last sliver of restraint between us. Every part of me buzzed with it. The ache hadn't faded. It had deepened, slowed into something heavier, more dangerous. A few people passed us on the sidewalk. I barely noticed. I was aware only of him, his heat, his scent, the way his eyes glanced down to my lips when he thought I wasn't looking, the way he seemed to move slower now, like drawing out the walk was its own kind of language. When we stepped into the lobby, the light hit us differently. I felt bare, exposed. Like the woman beside him wasn't the one who had walked out of that garage, but someone new. Someone stripped down to her want, her hunger, her truth. He pressed the elevator button, and I could feel his pulse even though we weren't touching. Still, we said nothing. But when the doors opened and he reached for my hand, finally, deliberately, I didn't hesitate. I let him lead me in, fingers laced tight in his. And as the doors slid shut behind us, sealing us inside that mirrored box, I exhaled. Not in relief, in surrender. Because whatever this was, wherever it was going, I was already his. And I had no desire, no ability, to stop it now. The moment the doors closed, I turned to him. I kissed him. Deep, consuming. Not to seduce, not to provoke, but to say, I'm still here. I'm still yours. His hands grazed my waist, holding back just enough, like he knew that if he gave in fully in this narrow steel box, we'd never make it to the room. When we reached his floor, my steps were quiet, but deliberate. His just behind mine, close enough to feel, not close enough to touch. The door clicked open. I walked in ahead of him. He had barely set down his keycard when I turned. What followed wasn't what either of us had planned. It was something truer than a plan. A reckoning. Not just physical, but deeply, quietly emotional. We had been dancing around something enormous all weekend, and this was the moment we finally let it land. He moved with intention. Not urgency, not desperation, but with a patience that felt almost reverent. Like he was taking his time because I was worth taking time with. Like he wanted to remember every moment of it. And I, for the first time in longer than I could admit, let myself be fully present, not performing, not calculating, not holding anything back. Just here, just his, just this. His touch was steady and unhurried, tracing every curve like he was reading something sacred in the language of my skin. And when I finally let go, really let go, it moved through me in waves. Trembling, gasping, surrendering to the heat. He stayed with me through all of it, never pulling back, never rushing ahead, just holding me. With his hands, his warmth, his presence, as if he needed it too. As if what was happening between us was as much his undoing as mine. Afterward, we lay tangled together, the room quiet and amber, our heartbeats slowly finding their way back to something ordinary. His hand traced slow, lazy patterns along my side, warm, gentle, grounding. Not the urgency of before, but something softer, something healing. I felt it in my chest, that rare, aching relief of feeling safe. Not just in body, but in spirit. As if the pieces I'd spent years holding together had finally found a place to rest. When I opened my eyes, there was no self-consciousness, no performance. The layers we wore around others, shyness, guard, the careful curation of ourselves, were gone. There were no roles left between us, just two people who had dared to be fully seen. He leaned in and brushed his lips against my temple, his breath warm against my skin. "Are you okay?" he whispered. It wasn't just about my body. I could hear that. There was something trembling in his voice, a kind of hesitation that made the question bigger than it sounded. As if what he was really asking was, "Do you feel this too?" I nodded, my fingers curling into his chest, not wanting to move. "More than okay," I whispered back, my voice thick at the edges. I've never felt anything like this." His arm tightened around me, drawing me closer. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining slowly, gently, like a silent vow he didn't yet know how to speak aloud. And even with the weight of what we had just shared, it didn't feel heavy. It felt light, like the world had tilted just slightly, and we had found a new center. Each other. This wasn't just lust. It wasn't just chemistry. It was something quietly anchoring, a secret neither of us had known we were keeping until now. He started, then paused, swallowed, like he needed a moment to gather the truth before speaking it. You're more than I ever expected. I turned to look at him. Really look. And in his eyes I saw it. This unguarded, honest thing. Like I was the answer to a question he hadn't realized he'd been asking. It made my heart race. Made something inside me stretch open in ways I hadn't expected either. More than you expected? I echoed, trying to tease, but my voice came out soft, unsure. Because I hadn't expected this either. I hadn't expected him to feel like this. He smiled, gentle, raw, real. Yeah. More. And just like that, the air between us shifted again, charged with something fragile and full of promise. We didn't need to define it. We didn't need to know where it was going. All that mattered was that something was happening, and it felt worth trusting. I pulled him closer, my lips brushing against his in a soft, unhurried kiss. No urgency, no chase, just connection. The kind that says, I see you. I trust this. He kissed me back just as gently, his hand cradling my face like I was something precious. And I let him. I let it all in. His touch, his warmth, this terrifying, beautiful thing we were building. For the first time, I didn't hold back. I let myself feel it, entirely, freely, without hesitation, without fear. When we finally pulled back, our foreheads rested together, breath mingling in the hush between us. The silence was full, not empty, full of everything we weren't saying and everything we had already shared. I could hear my heartbeat, quiet, steady, and specific, as if it had finally found something to beat for. End of chapter 6. If you're enjoying the story, this is the tamed version. If you want the full, unedited, quivering desire, every heat, every detail, every moment we had to leave out to keep it clean for this platform, grab your physical copy and enjoy the uninhibited version. Quivering Desire. Chapter 7. Unleashed Passion. I was back to myself that Sunday morning, composed, capable, radiant in my blazer and heels, walking with the measured grace of a woman who owned the room. It was the second and final day of the seminar, and I carried the weight of my title with ease, greeting familiar faces, exchanging pleasantries, commanding every interaction with quiet confidence. No one would have guessed that just hours earlier I had been breathless and undone, losing myself in something far more profound than I'd planned for. I had gone home in the early morning light, washed away the scent of the night, and pieced together a story about where I'd been. Then I returned to the hotel, wearing professionalism like a second skin. But inside, something was different. Something had been touched, shaken loose. I wasn't the same woman I'd been before this weekend, and it wasn't until late morning, as I stood laughing lightly with a group of visiting reps, that it happened. A colleague I'd known for years, who knew my quirks, my tells, my moods, smiled and said, "You're glowing today." That one word, glowing, it lingered in the air too long. It hit me like a crash of warm waves against a fragile shore. I froze for a heartbeat, and in that stillness, it all came rushing back. The way he'd held me like I was something sacred. The raw need in his eyes. The way I had finally let go of everything I'd been gripping so tightly. I was reliving it. Every touch, Every whispered word, every moment I'd chosen to stop pretending. I laughed it off, of course, said something coy, but inside I felt exposed, raw, undone. Like the glow they noticed wasn't from a good night's sleep, but from being seen. Truly, completely seen. And though I carried on with the rest of the morning, speaking on panels, networking with polished charm, a Pandora's box had been cracked open, and there was no putting the memories, the sensations, the fire, back in. I excused myself to freshen up, ducking into the quiet sanctuary of the hotel restroom. My reflection stared back at me, composed, flawless, poised. But I saw right through it. Beneath the mascara and carefully applied lip gloss was a woman teetering between her need and her better judgment. I turned on the tap, letting cold water rush over my hands, trying to absorb the heat that still lingered from the memory of his touch, his voice, the way he had looked at me as if nothing else in the world mattered. But everything did matter. Everything I had built. My name, my role, my image. And this was a threat to all of it. I knew what was happening. I was hyper-aware. This wasn't just infatuation. It was hunger, dangerous and unrelenting, and I needed to get it under control before it spilled into the one space I could never afford to corrupt. The office. Tomorrow we'd be back in the real world. No hotel rooms, no elevators humming with anticipation. Just glass walls, open desks, board meetings, and paper trails. I had worked too hard, carved my name too cleanly into the space I held there. I couldn't let this follow me back. But it wasn't that simple. Because I needed him, not just in the way bodies need each other, but in the way storms crave wind, in the way secrets beg to be whispered into skin. And that need was dangerous. That need could make me reckless. That need could cost me everything. I closed my eyes and took a breath that burned my lungs. What I needed was clarity. But clarity was a luxury that desire doesn't allow. I dried my hands and stared again at the mask I'd have to wear. The truth settled like lead in my stomach. If I felt anything like this tomorrow at the office, I was going to do something I'd regret. So what now? Maybe just once more, whispered the voice in my head, draped in silk and bad intentions. One more time, and that's it. You'll get it out of your system. But that was a lie. I knew it. Just like I knew that logic didn't stand a chance against the memory of his breath on my skin. I gripped the sink edge and closed my eyes. Jeez, I muttered under my breath. Get a hold of yourself. I straightened, smoothed my dress, fixed my hair, professional, composed. But underneath, a ticking bomb laced in silk and secrets. I left the washroom with a plan. To breathe, to regroup, to padlock the box with professionalism and get through the day. But the moment I stepped back into the seminar room, a colleague tilted her head and gave me a look that cracked the veneer I'd tried so hard to reapply. You okay? You don't seem yourself. Not myself. If only she knew. I nodded vaguely, muttered something about needing air, and slipped out before I said too much. I was halfway down the corridor when fate decided to mock me. There he was, tall, calm, that familiar presence that made everything in me jolt. My heart kicked up like a racehorse at the gate. Hey, he said, voice too warm, too casual. You all right? I could have laughed. Was I all right? I was unraveling thread by thread, and he had no idea he was the needle pulling it all loose. He tilted his head. Do you want to lie down? And there it was. The invitation disguised as concern. An opening I had both dreamed of and dreaded since Friday. But something in me, something I didn't know I still had, rose and took the wheel. No, I said, gently but firmly. I just need some air. I'll be fine. He smirked. That slow, knowing curve of the lips that made my stomach knot. With the way you look right now, you'd be lucky to make it to the exit without collapsing. I rolled my eyes, but I could feel the heat in my cheeks. He stepped closer, and instinctively, I leaned into him as he steadied me. His touch light and effortless, but it lit something inside me that had only been smoldering seconds ago. I shouldn't have needed his help. But there I was, shoulder to chest, letting his hand wrap around mine like it had every right to. "I'm not feeling myself," I said. And for once, my mouth honored my brain. It wasn't a lie. When you're dangling on the edge of desire and disaster, even partial honesty feels like an act of valor. The stronger I wanted to be, the weaker I became. And now, with him right next to me, breathing the same air, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just resisting him anymore. I was resisting myself. The moment the elevator dinged, I snapped out of my haze and realized I had walked in the opposite direction of fresh air. Unconsciously, I hadn't been seeking air at all. I had been walking straight into the fire. His room was quiet, dimly lit, cooler than I remembered. Or maybe it was just me who was burning up. He guided me to the bed, pressed a bottle of water into my hand with that careful tenderness that should have soothed me, but only fanned the ache. He tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear and kissed my forehead, soft, lingering, reverent. "I'll head back down," he said, voice gentle. "But if you need anything at all, call me. No hesitation." I nodded. Didn't trust myself to speak. He walked to the door. Left. The door closed behind him. 1 second. 2. 3. By the 4th, I was calling. My voice was barely above a whisper, but the words were fierce. "Come back. Now." I stood. Or tried to. My knees buckled slightly, and I caught myself on the edge of the bed. Just in time, the door swung open. He was there. Breathless, concerned, ready. His hands reached for me, steadying me like I mattered more than anything else in the world. And in that moment, everything clicked. The no had been weakening me. The restraint, the distance, the denial. I had worn them like armor, but they had started to crack the moment he touched me at the elevator. Saying yes wasn't surrender, it was power. Because the second I let go, I came back to life. I stood up straight. My body wasn't trembling anymore. My eyes locked onto his like I finally saw clearly. He looked at me like he wasn't sure what I needed, but I was. "I don't want to talk," I whispered, stepping into him. "I don't want to think. Just make me forget the rules." He hesitated, searching my face for doubt. "No," I cut in, my voice firm, clear, unwavering. "I've never felt stronger." And I meant it. Because something had shifted. That slow unraveling I'd felt all day, the heat, the confusion, the ache for control, had settled into something solid, something real. This wasn't weakness. This was the moment I returned to myself. Fully, fiercely. He felt the change, saw it in my eyes. And what came next wasn't tentative or cautious. It was honest. Both of us, finally, completely honest with each other. He moved with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing someone, really knowing them. Every touch deliberate, every moment held like it mattered. And I didn't hold back this time. Not an inch. I led as much as I followed, gave as much as I took. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, the office and the titles and the careful calculus of what this might cost me, all of it dissolved. There was only this, only us, only the terrifying, glorious freedom of wanting something and letting yourself have it without apology. When it was over, I laughed. Quiet, disbelieving, almost drunk on the afterglow. A laugh born from somewhere raw and bright. Half awe, half what the hell just happened. All of this, from a simple compliment. One offhand remark about my glow, a harmless comment, had triggered an avalanche. And now here I was, glowing, tangled in him, and somehow completely reborn. Neither of us moved. There was no need. His arm looped around my waist like a tether, his breath warm against my neck. I didn't want to rush, didn't want to speak, because nothing we could say would make more sense than the silence now curling around us like a second skin. Sweaty, breathless, holy. Like whatever storm we'd just walked through had washed something clean. His heartbeat raced under my palm, quick and heavy, the last tremor of the chaos we'd just weathered. It made me smile, that his body was still reacting to mine, even in the stillness. There was something sacred about this moment. A lull, like the ocean pulling back after the wave. No pressure to speak, no promises looming in the air. Just the soft, grounding rhythm of his chest rising beneath my cheek, and the weight of his hand moving in slow, lazy circles along my back. Not to ignite, not to tempt, just to remember. My legs stayed thrown over his, our limbs fitting together too easily, like puzzle pieces that had been waiting for this moment to snap into place. There was no shame, no reaching for the blanket to hide, just the warm, weightless haze of having been completely undone by someone and not needing to apologize for it. I tilted my head and looked up at him. His eyes were half-lidded, and there was something dazed in his expression, like he was still somewhere in the wreckage of what we'd just created. He looked at me like I was both the fire and the water that doused it. I laughed, soft and breathy, the sound trembling against his collarbone. "What?" he murmured, voice gravel and silk. "You," I whispered, hiding my smile in the curve of his shoulder. "Just you." He chuckled, low, hoarse, rich with that afterglow that sits somewhere between disbelief and satisfaction. His lips brushed the crown of my head, a kiss so gentle it barely registered, and yet somehow hit deeper than the ones that had come before. Right then, wrapped in him, all heat and heartbeat and skin, I felt the most dangerous kind of safe. No guards, no masks, nothing held back. I knew it couldn't last forever. Reality was out there, looming beyond the walls, waiting with questions and consequences. But here, now, with his hand on my back and my breath still tangled with his, I let myself stay, still glowing, still his, even if just for now. End of Chapter 7. If you're enjoying the story, this is the tamed version. If you want the full, unedited, quivering desire, every heat, every detail, every moment we had to leave out to keep it clean for this platform, grab your physical copy and enjoy the uninhibited version. Quivering Desire. Chapter 8. Midnight Fire. After the seminar, I went home, heels in hand, skin still buzzing from the last encounter. Not just with him, but with myself. There was something different in my steps, something softer, looser, as though my body had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. I kicked the door shut behind me, tossed my bag onto the nearest chair, and walked straight to the kitchen, unbuttoning my blazer as I moved. I poured myself a glass of red wine, something bold, dry, smooth, like the way I wanted the rest of my day to feel. The first sip slipped past my lips like velvet, warming me from the inside out, and I leaned back against the counter with a breathy laugh, shaking my head at myself. What was happening to me? I was no longer the same woman who had come home from work 2 days ago, poised, polished, the picture of professionalism. That woman had gone through something intimate and electric, something that cracked her open and poured in this unfamiliar heat, this softness, this glow. And now? She was laughing in her kitchen with bare feet, messy hair, and a wine glass she hadn't even meant to pour, remembering hands that had studied her like scripture. I undressed slowly, peeling off the layers of my workday like old stories I no longer needed to wear. Each garment slid down with a sigh until I was wrapped in nothing but a robe and that lingering warmth of the weekend. I slipped under the sheets, still warm from the sun, and let myself melt into the silence. I passed out so deeply I wasn't sure I dreamt at all, only floated in some space where the line between memory and fantasy no longer mattered. I woke hours later. Everything felt deliciously heavy, like the world had slowed just for me. My limbs stretched languidly across the bed, each muscle unfolding, every joint releasing, my spine arching with a little gasp of satisfaction. The sheets were tangled around my legs like a lover refusing to let go, and I stayed there for a moment longer, warm and dazed, my body humming with quiet contentment. Refreshed, relaxed, ruined in the most beautiful way. Tidying up felt like dancing. Not the kind done for show, but the kind where your soul leads and your body follows, carefree, unchoreographed, and perfectly in sync with a rhythm only you can hear. I folded the throw on the couch as if it were silk, fluffed pillows like they were clouds. Even the dishes in the sink felt like percussion in the background of my mood. I was moving through the home like it was mine again. More than that, I was mine again. There was a bounce in my step that hadn't been there before, a tilt to my smile. I had never felt this light, this alive. And the strange thing was, it wasn't just because of Damien. I'd spent the last few days in a whirlwind, of hunger, of heat, of surrender. And now, standing barefoot in my own space with the windows open and the world quiet, I finally felt the calm after the storm. Not broken, not confused, just centered. I thought about Damien and laughed. Not the nervous, unsure kind of laugh I'd been managing all weekend, but a real one. A full-bodied, belly-deep laugh that came from a place of peace. Yes, he had touched me in ways no one ever had. Yes, he'd made me feel things that had me unraveling in elevators and drifting in hallways. But now I could look at it all with a clarity that felt earned. I understood something now. There was a difference between what Damien did to me and what he did to my body. The craving, the heat, the fire, it was real. But my soul had watched, waited, and learned. And what I had learned was this. I could want him without losing myself. I could give in to desire and still be grounded, because I'd already tasted the storm and survived it. Beautifully. Back in control, back to myself, and more alive than ever. As if on cue, seriously, like the universe had written it into the script. I sank into the couch, legs folded beneath me, freshly showered, wine glass half full, the mood mellow and soft like the exhale after a storm. I'd declared the weekend officially over. I was done. No more drama, no more overthinking, no more temptation. I even smiled at the thought, like I'd outwitted some wild beast and reclaimed my peace. Then my phone buzzed. Hey, what are you up to? Simple, harmless, casual. Except it was Damien. And suddenly, I was 16, heart fluttering like I'd just opened a note in class that read, "Do you like me? Yes or no?" I fidgeted, laughed at myself, took a slow sip of wine. Only this time, he didn't unravel me. He didn't trigger some chaotic spiral. He didn't spark that same aching need, at least not immediately. I typed back, carefully breezy. Nothing much, just finished chores and getting ready for another work week. What about you? He replied fast, too fast. Just finished a drink and sitting here in my room watching a movie. Want to join me? Just like that. 7 words, and I was spinning again. That was a chill, friendly offer to anyone else on this planet. But to me? An encrypted message in a language I was dangerously fluent in. Was he being sincere? Was this platonic? Did he want something? Was he teasing? My thoughts raced, each one interrupting the other. But then that voice in my head, the calm one, the clear one, reminded me, you're in control now. You choose. You set the terms. So I breathed, composed myself, recentered. I didn't feel the feverish heat that had once overtaken me. The fire wasn't roaring. It was embers now. Manageable. Warm rather than wild. So I texted him. I'd like to join you if you're serious. I'm getting bored out of my mind at home. True. Every word. Then I added, give me about an hour and I'll be there. I put the phone down and took a deep breath. Not nervously, calmly. This time, I wasn't walking into the lion's den. I was walking into my story. On my terms. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time before grabbing my bag. My eyes had a calm radiance, as if I'd journeyed through a storm and emerged with a quiet kind of power, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. What surprised me most was that the thought of Damien didn't send sparks running through me like a live wire anymore. It made me smile. Soft, grateful, a little amused. I had stopped seeing him as a wildfire I couldn't control, and started seeing him as part of a moment, a beautiful, unexpected moment, that had simply passed through my life. So with my head held high and my lips curved into a knowing smile, I walked into the hotel like I was walking into a new chapter. The lobby lighting caught the soft gleam of my skin. The elevator mirrors reflected a woman who wasn't chasing anything anymore. I wasn't here because I couldn't stay away. I was here because I had chosen to come. When I reached his door, I wasn't anxious. No butterflies, no war inside me. Just presence, just peace. I knocked once. Silence. Twice. Louder. Still nothing. A flicker of irritation. Was this one of his games? But then, through the muted hum of the hallway, his deep voice slid through the door like silk. Come in. 2 words. That's all it took. And everything I thought I had recovered. My control, my calm, the neat little box I'd shoved my emotions into, dissolved like smoke. I opened the door and stepped into something that didn't feel like his hotel room anymore. The lights were off. Only candles lit the space, soft golden flames dancing gently, swaying to some rhythm I couldn't hear but definitely felt. And the scent. Warm, woody, a hint of spice. It wrapped around me like slow-burning fog, seductive and welcoming, blurring the lines between this world and something far more primal. I couldn't see him at first. I kept walking in, cautiously calling his name. Part nerves, part curiosity, part a hunger I hadn't come here to feed, but now couldn't ignore. Then he emerged, standing there, tall and still, like a statue carved out of shadow and flame. The candlelight caught the lines of him, golden and unhidden, and he wasn't moving. He was watching, letting me take him in. He didn't need to say a word. His body was speaking for him. Every inhale, every inch of him told me what he wanted. And this time it wasn't just desire tangled up in chaos. It was an invitation. It was clarity. It was him wanting me, not needing me, not reacting to a moment, choosing me, all of me. And it wrecked me. I had wanted him before, in flashes, in fantasies, in the quiet moments when desire stirred beneath the surface like a secret. But this wasn't a flicker. This was a blaze. And what undid me wasn't just my wanting. It was his, raw, honest, unhidden. He didn't play coy, didn't pretend he wasn't standing there needing me just as much. Maybe more. It hit me like a wave. And everything I thought I needed to protect? Gone. Melted. There was no space left for fear. Only heat. Only him. Don't move, I said softly. It wasn't a request. His jaw twitched, but he nodded once. And then I started to undress. Slowly. Deliberately. one piece at a time, letting the fabric fall like confessions between us. His eyes followed every motion, but his body stayed still, just barely. Each piece I shed felt like shedding more than just clothes. It felt like shedding caution, control, or maybe claiming it. The way he watched me made me feel like every inch of exposed skin was something he'd been waiting to see, not just to desire, but to know. When I finally stood bare before him, I took a beat. Let him look. Let him ache. Then I moved closer. Every step a pull on the tension stretched between us. His hands clenched at his sides. His eyes burned. But he didn't touch me. Didn't move. He waited. And when I finally reached him, when I pressed myself into him, skin to skin, heat to heat, he let out a sound so low, so raw, it went straight through me. We had talked about watching a movie, something casual, forgettable, background noise to pretend the air between us wasn't crackling. But the second his eyes lingered a moment too long, the script changed. We weren't watching anything. We were the movie. What followed was unlike anything that had come before. This wasn't the urgency of Friday night, or the tender reverence of Saturday morning. This was something else entirely, a reckoning. An exchange of power and surrender that shifted back and forth between us like a tide. At times I led. At times he did. But at every moment, we were together in it. Fully present, fully honest, holding nothing back. He gave himself to me in a way that felt like trust, like an offering. And I gave myself back the same way. Every touch was deliberate. Every breath was shared. Every moment felt like it had been building toward this. Not just over the course of a weekend, but maybe longer. As if two people can spend their whole lives becoming the versions of themselves that are finally ready for something real. He moved with me like he already knew me. Every response, every shiver, every sound I made. And I knew him just as well by now. The way his breath changed. The way his hands told a different story from his voice. I had never felt so completely seen, or so completely free. When we finally stilled, breathless, spent, tangled in each other in the ruins of a night neither of us had planned, there was a moment of pure, suspended quiet. And in that quiet, I felt something bloom in my chest that I hadn't expected. Not just satisfaction, not just desire, something that felt dangerously close to love. We lay there, a tangled mess of limbs and sheets, wrapped around each other like vines too entwined to separate. The only sounds were our breaths, slow, uneven, but gradually sinking, like our hearts were learning to speak the same rhythm. His chest rose and fell beneath my cheek, warm and solid, like a grounding force after a storm. I traced small circles on his skin with my fingertip, mind half-dazed, body still humming with aftershocks. There was no rush, no need to speak. We had said everything in the way we moved, in the way we touched, in the way we surrendered. He kissed the top of my head, not with urgency, but with something softer, something tender and real. I felt his fingers graze along my spine, lazy and reverent, as if he was still exploring but with no destination in mind, just pleasure in presence. The candles still flickered in the corners of the room, shadows dancing across the walls. Time had paused for us, or maybe it had melted entirely. I had no idea what hour it was. I didn't care. He whispered something. I didn't even catch the words, but it made me smile. Whatever it was laced in affection. Maybe awe, maybe disbelief. I kissed his jaw, his neck, then tucked myself into him again, breathing him in, memorizing the exact weight of this moment. My body felt like silk and flame all at once. And my mind? For the first time in forever, it was quiet. I didn't know what would come next. But right then, tangled up in him, in this hush of shared euphoria, I didn't need to know. His breath was steady now, slower, deeper, almost like waves lapping against a shore. I let my eyes flutter closed, listening to the rise and fall of his chest, that soft rhythm becoming my lullaby. My fingers were still loosely intertwined with his, neither of us willing to let go, even in rest. He shifted slightly, not to move away, but just enough to pull me closer, as if sleep would only come if he felt every inch of me against him, and I didn't resist. I couldn't. I fit perfectly in that space, his arms around me, the warmth between us, the softness of the sheets cradling our bodies like a secret we didn't want the world to know yet. He pressed one last kiss into my hair. Not out of passion this time, but something more profound. A gentle surrender. A silent thank you. And then, in the hush of flickering candlelight and cooling skin, we drifted. 2 heartbeats, 1 quiet night, and a sleep so complete, so safe, it felt like a home we'd both forgotten we needed in of Chapter 8. If you're enjoying the story, this is the tamed version. If you want the full, unedited, quivering desire, every heat, every detail, every moment we had to leave out to keep it clean for this platform, grab your physical copy and enjoy the uninhibited version. Quivering Desire, Chapter 9, The Ultimate Dopamine Rush. We had certainly passed out sometime after midnight, our bodies finally surrendering after a storm of passion. Yet when I stirred just before dawn, I wasn't tired. I wasn't sore. I was glowing, from the inside out. A warmth still coursed through me like the embers of a fire that had blazed all night and now glowed steady and low. The sheets were a tangled mess of stories, the room still scented with a blend of candle wax, his cologne, and the trace of our skin. I blinked slowly, the world hazy in the faint lavender-blue glow of morning. His body, lying beside mine, was stretched out in a picture of tranquility, bare, golden, softly rising and falling with each breath. His face had softened in sleep, almost boyish, lips parted slightly as if he was still whispering my name in some dream I hoped I had starred in. I should have gotten up. I had work, a life to get back to, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. Not yet. I let my fingers trail lightly along the ridge of his collarbone, the dip between his shoulder and chest where I had nuzzled the night before. My leg, draped over his, clung just a little tighter, my skin greedy for that quiet heat. I told myself I didn't want to wake him. He looked too peaceful. But the truth was, I needed one more moment. One more taste of this serenity. It wasn't just lust. It wasn't just chemistry. It was dopamine. A euphoric high I hadn't expected. The kind that came not from climax but from connection. And as I lay there, my hand splayed across his chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart, I hoped, quietly, desperately, that he was dreaming about me. That maybe, in whatever world his mind had drifted to, he was still feeling my touch, still hearing my voice, still reliving what we'd created just hours before. Part of me knew I had to let go, get dressed, face the day. But another part, perhaps the most genuine part, just wanted to stay wrapped in the aftermath of a night that had melted every boundary and rewritten every rule of what I thought intimacy could be. So I held him. And in that still, perfect silence before the world stirred, I let myself believe that moments like this were more than just fleeting. They were transformative. And I, glowing, tangled, and completely at peace, was transformed. I was enjoying my body against his like a cat in a sunbeam, stretching into every inch of warmth he offered, pressing myself into the smooth, solid comfort of his skin. Every point of contact felt like a secret I didn't want to share with the world outside. The silence wrapped around us like a second blanket, warm and unbroken, except for the sound of his steady breath and the rhythmic beating of his heart beneath my palm. I knew the moment was ending. The weekend, the spell, whatever bubble we had built between us. It had reached its final edge. And I dreaded that edge. The thought of peeling myself away from him and returning to the real world was almost unbearable. For a fleeting second, I actually thought about pulling him closer, whispering for him to call in sick, and slipping right back into the dream. Just one more hour, one more morning wrapped in this hazy bliss. But I let the idea float away, laughing softly at my fantasy. Still, I didn't move. My arms, draped across his chest, felt bound there by invisible threads. I was savoring him, taking mental photographs of how his skin felt warm and impossibly real under my fingertips. Not possessive in the traditional sense, but with a quiet claim to it. Like I was marking the memory, not to own, but to remember. This wasn't about not wanting to let him go. This was about not wanting to let this go. The feeling, the closeness, the freedom I'd found in him and in myself. I didn't cry. I didn't pout. I just stayed a little longer. When I finally stirred, it wasn't to leave. Not yet. My body moved on instinct. A pull as natural as breath, as reckless as everything else this weekend had been. His eyes were still closed, but he was already awake in the way bodies are before minds catch up. Aware of me, reaching for me without reaching at all. His voice broke through the quiet, low, and gravelly with the remnants of sleep. I hope you're not planning to start something you don't intend to finish. It'd be cruel to leave me hanging. I froze for half a second. Because God, that voice could melt glaciers. Could make a woman forget every sane thing she was ever taught about restraint. A smirk tugged at my lips. Cruel? I murmured, shifting just enough to make him hiss through his teeth. I haven't even gotten mean yet. And just like that, the gates flew open. Every unspoken thing I'd been holding back all weekend, the bold ones, the tender ones, the ones too honest to name, rushed forward in a torrent. I was done holding back. And he knew it. He wanted it. What made it worse, or better, was the way he looked at me. Like he knew. Like he relished every moment. Like every move I made toward the edge only pulled him deeper into the abyss with me, and he'd go willingly. Oh, I plan to finish, I whispered. But not quickly. His breath hitched. His grip tightened. And the roles that had already been shifting all weekend, who led, who followed, who surrendered, dissolved entirely. What came next was neither surrender nor conquest. It was something rarer than both. It was two people so completely themselves with each other that every movement became honest, every sound, a confession, every pause, a choice freely made. He moved with a kind of focused reverence that made me feel like every nerve ending in my body had been rewired to respond only to him. And I gave back in kind, holding nothing in reserve, leaving no part of myself hidden. You feel like sin, he growled against my throat. Like you were made just to break me. You're already breaking, I breathed, and I haven't even started. A low, wicked sound rumbled from his chest. Half laugh, half something more. We talked between breaths. We laughed between moans. We said things that shouldn't have been said and meant every syllable. And somewhere in the middle of it all, suspended in that impossible space where pleasure blurs into something sacred, I understood what this weekend had really been about. Not escape, not recklessness, recognition. Two people finally recognizing something in each other that neither had the language for until now. Don't, he breathed at one point, forehead pressed to mine. Not yet. I obeyed, not because I had to, but because I trusted him with that power. Fully, freely. You're killing me, I whispered. No, he said, voice like gravel and smoke. I'm remaking you. Our bodies kept moving, slow, perfect, rhythmic. His lips dragged across my throat, whispering things too tender to survive the morning light. You're mine, he said. Always, I whispered back. I just need you to take me. I'm not taking you, he murmured, pulling me closer. I'm keeping you. And somehow, through the ache and the shaking and the impossible pressure climbing higher and higher, I held on. Because he hadn't told me to fall. And I was waiting for that word like it was salvation. Come for me, he whispered finally, his voice cracked open and raw. Fall apart in my hands. And God help me. I did. Not once. Not twice. But in waves that refused to let up, crashing over me until I couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. I wasn't even words anymore. Just sensation. Just him. Just this. And still, he didn't stop. Not until he fell with me. His release moved through him like the final note of something long composed and finally played. He was buried in me, in the quake of it, giving everything, every piece, every promise, every ounce of control he had held so tightly until now. You'll feel me for the rest of your life, he said afterward, voice barely above a whisper. And I would. God, I would. The stillness that followed felt almost unreal, like the world outside our window had paused out of respect for what had just happened between us. The storm was over, but the air was still charged, humming with the weight of everything we'd said without words. Our bodies remained tangled, too intertwined to tell where I ended and he began. His skin was warm beneath my cheek, his heartbeat a slow, steady rhythm I could have sworn had synced to mine. I traced it with my fingertips. Lazy, looping patterns on his chest, like if I stopped touching him, I might forget this was real. He shifted just slightly, enough to press a kiss to my hair. Nothing hungry, nothing demanding, just presence, intention. Did I leave a mark? He asked softly, almost teasing, but not quite. There was something raw behind the words, maybe even a little scared. I didn't open my eyes, just smiled and whispered, all over me. He exhaled slowly, and I felt it ripple through his whole body. His thumb brushed the back of my hand, slow, reverent, like he wasn't just touching skin, but something deeper, something permanent. We lay like that for a while, not measuring time, not needing to. Eventually, I rolled just enough to face him, our noses barely touching, foreheads close enough to share breath. His eyes were half-lidded, but locked on me, pupils dark and soft. I looked at him the way you look at something you're afraid to blink away from. I don't want to fall asleep, I murmured, voice feather light. He smiled, crooked and sleepy and real. Then don't, he said. Just stay here. Here. In his arms. In the warmth still lingering in the sheets. In this fragile, golden hour, where nothing from the outside world could reach us. We didn't speak again. No declarations. No promises. Just two bodies recovering from something holy. Two souls wrapped so tightly around the silence that even the morning didn't dare interrupt. And as the sun climbed higher, soft light spilling across our skin, I realized something. I wasn't just lying beside him. I was home. I had only ever heard a few women whisper about something they called Cloud 9, their eyes going distant with memory. And now I understood. It had clicked. It was real. My brain was foggy. My body still hummed with aftershocks. I had come harder than I ever had in my life, again and again, until I couldn't tell where one wave ended and the next began. The pleasure had lingered like a flavor, like sugar on the tongue, and I was floating in it. Floating in him. After catching my breath, I kissed him. Slow, deep, like a thank you and maybe a promise. My lips lingered on his just long enough to leave an echo. Then I whispered that I had to go home and get ready for work. I watched his eyes when I said it. Not I have to leave. Not this is over. Just a soft ushering in of reality. Deliberately vague. Gently true. I didn't want to close the door too firmly. I didn't want to admit what I hadn't fully named yet. I hoped he understood what I couldn't quite say. That I was leaving, yes, but not all of me. That something of me was still in his bed, in his breath, in the warmth pressed into those tangled sheets. That I hadn't fallen, not yet. But the descent had begun, and I wasn't bracing for the impact anymore. The shower I took was quick, but nothing about it felt ordinary. My skin was still buzzing. My lips, still tender from the kind of kissing that felt like confession. My legs, still shaky beneath me like I'd been wrecked by something too exquisite to stand on. And when I stepped back into my clothes, his scent still clinging to them like a secret, I knew something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just walking into a Monday morning. I was stepping into it as a woman rewritten, bold, claimed, glowing from the inside out. This weekend hadn't changed everything, but it had changed enough. It reminded me of who I could be when I let myself feel, when I let myself want, when I let someone in far enough to touch the parts of me I'd tucked away for too long. It reminded me what it felt like to be fully seen, completely taken, gloriously, recklessly wanted. The end. If you're enjoying the story, this is the tamed version. If you want the full, unedited, quivering desire, every heat, every detail, every moment we had to leave out to keep it clean for this platform, grab your physical copy.